Eric, I'm going to introduce you to a weird word.
A weird word.
Pediophobia.
Pediophobia.
Sounds like it could be worse than what it really is. Pediophobia is the fear of dolls. Now, most dolls aren't going to terrorize the people that own them, but some people, for some reason, experience an intense fear when confronted with dolls. And sometimes there's a good reason for that. There are so many haunted dolls that it's even become something of a joke. One of the podcasts I listened to used to do a haunted doll watch where they would pull listings from eBay and read them on their show.
Oh, yeah.
Which had nothing to do with what we talk about. So that is our topic tonight, is haunted dolls.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Well, I will say, Bill and I were discussing this kind of some content that we had each brought to the table right here before we walked into the recording studio. And we both quickly agreed we could do multiple episodes on haunted dolls. There are a lot of them out there. However, ironically, we did both overlap on one in particular. We'll get into that here in a bit.
Yeah, what we learned was that doesn't necessarily need to be a one-time either. I mean, since we did overlap, there's definitely a lot left. Well, according to Linda Rodriguez McRobbie, the idea of evil dolls gained attention in the 1800s when film and technology allowed for the realistic portrayal of the safely inanimate dolls as a dangerously animate object, something to be feared. Dr. Margie Kerr, sociologist who specializes in fear, says, quote, while our childhood experiences with dolls may have been a source of joy, comfort, or even safety, seeing dolls out of context can freak us out as an ultimate betrayal of innocence. I mean, especially older dolls, where either A, the craftsmanship isn't very good, or almost too good sometimes.
It's almost superb. Yeah, some of those old German bisque dolls.
Yeah, you enter into that uncanny valley territory where they look too human. And of course, you have movies like Chucky and Annabelle and things like that. Chucky, of course, being, I'm assuming entirely fictional, although based in part on a real doll, which I think we'll talk about tonight. Then you have Annabelle, which based on the Warrens' investigation of that particular doll.
Several movies.
Yeah, multiple movies. But when you see these, I will say, when you see a picture of a haunted doll, your first impulse is like, oh yeah, that doll's haunted, 100%. Because they all look terrifying. Now, that may be the reason why they get labeled as haunted dolls, because they look terrifying.
Could be.
But, I mean, there's so many stories of these dolls, and I do go back to that, like, they're supposed to be cute, but sometimes they have that it's like clowns in a way.
Well, funny story, a real life story, firsthand. As you guys may or may not know, I have dealt in antiques and swapping and trading for over 30 years of my life. About 3 years ago, I came across one of the ventriloquist dolls of Charlie McCarthy. Now, this is the little guy with the little monocle and the black top hat. And I took it out because obviously it's not something that I would sell in Ravensloft when we had that open as a hobby and gaming store. Took it out to our flea market booth. And there is something about a ventriloquist doll, I have to admit, that I think it's with the animation and the mouth moving, possibly the eyes being able to move, definitely kind of gives you a weird vibe.
Well, ventriloquist dolls look weird anyway.
So I put this thing out in our booth. It lasted 2 days. And as luck would have it,
it got up and walked away?
No, not quite. Not quite. I'm on Facebook on one of my friends, Facebook friends that I worked with, actually that worked for me. Her name is Casey. And her man's name is Thomas, are posting on Facebook with pictures of this doll. Now, they don't know that they purchased it from me. They just said, Oh my gosh, we were at the Heartland Antique Mall this weekend. The creepy ass haunted most doll I've ever seen. It's this ventriloquist doll, and said Casey had to have it, so we bought it. And since we brought it home, all this weird stuff's going on at the house and everything. And I'm kind of sitting back there chuckling. And I did finally message them, and I was like, "You're welcome."
You're welcome. I gave you the opportunity to buy this haunted relic.
I'm finally free of it.
That's what it sounds. I got rid of it. Thank you. You should have been thanking them. Yeah. Well, I think let's just get into the overlap. We'll just start there. The story of Robert the doll. Now, I did find a nice little twist that I'm going to add later on that Eric did not find.
I did not find it, but I'm eagerly anticipating it.
Now, this 117-year-old doll, I'm going to say it's plain-faced. Not that it's unremarkable, but simply there are very little features. Even where like the eye indents and stuff, I mean, they're just kind of barely there.
And by the way, this is Key West, Florida.
Yeah, it still looks fairly sinister, to be honest. And it wears an old sailor suit, which is likely an outfit that once belonged to Robert Otto, one-time owner. Probably an outfit he wore as a child.
Actually, I've got a little bit more information on that, but we'll get to that.
Now, on display in the museum, where he's currently at the East Martello Museum in Key West, like Eric said, he also has a weirdly proportioned stuffed dog sitting in his lap, which I don't think was part of the original doll, but it may be. Yeah. Anyway,
a doll holding a toy stuffed dog.
This doll was originally once owned by painter, author, and Key West resident Robert Eugene Otto, who was called Gene by his family. And I'm going to call him Gene when we talk about him to differentiate between Gene, the man, and Robert the doll. Gene was the child of a prominent Key West family, and this doll was purchased by his grandfather while he was in Germany. Strangely enough, was also made by the same company that made the first teddy bear.
Steiff.
This doll was given to Gene as a birthday gift.
On his 8th birthday.
Though some versions of the story claim that a young girl of, quote, Bahamian descent gifted Gene the doll as either just a gift or as retaliation for a wrongdoing.
Bahamian?
Bahamian.
Oh.
I think the implication there is voodoo.
Oh, okay.
Like it was meant as a curse.
Okay.
Now, this duo had what was called a strange relationship, basically all through Gene's life.
Very
up into
strange.
Adulthood. He took this doll everywhere and treated it as if it was a living entity. Now, according to the stories, young Gene began to blame the doll for household mishaps almost immediately. But the strange incidents really started one night when 10-year-old Gene woke up to find Robert sitting at the end of his bed staring at him. Moments later, his mother was awakened by his screams for help and what sounded like furniture being thrown around in her son's bedroom. Now, she rushed to Gene's room, and when she got there, the door was locked. Finally, she was able to force her way in and found Gene curled up in terror on his bed. The room just a shambles, things thrown around, furniture moved, and Robert sitting at the foot of the bed.
Now, by the way, Robert is almost a life-size doll, to put it in perspective.
For a kid size.
About 3 foot tall.
Yeah, it's a pretty big doll.
Yep.
Now, strangeness just kind of plagued the family after that. Gene's parents would often hear him having full conversations with the doll in other rooms and would hear him getting responses in a totally different voice.
Mm-hmm. A very gruff, deep voice.
They would also claim they saw the doll speak and change facial expressions, as well as hearing giggling throughout the house, and even claimed to have seen the doll run up and down the steps of the home.
Now, the mother, I believe Maria was her name, even said that when she would be walking out the hallway or maybe tucking him in for the night, Gene or Eugene would tell the doll, Robert, good night, and she would sometimes hear this gruff voice, and she even ran back into the bedroom one night, and it's like, who made that sound? And Gene would always point and say, well, Mom, Robert did.
Well, Robert did it became a common phrase in that household.
Yes. She said what was more disturbing is in the months that unfolded, she started listening for this, like every night when she would tuck him away for bed. She would stand outside the door, and again, they're a wealthy family, so there were servants and stuff that would kind of be walking through the hallway, and occasionally they would stop and listen as well. Said what was even creepier was, one, there was no way this 8-year-old boy could, he hadn't even reached puberty. There's no way he could have such a deep, gruff voice, coming out of an 8-year-old. But two, the voices would overlap, which goes back to ventriloquism.
Yeah.
This 8-year-old boy must have been a master ventriloquist.
I don't think you can do that.
They were overlapping, so that was kind of creepy.
Yeah, I mean, it got to the point it was so bad that his mom would eventually lock Robert in the attic to kind of, I guess, try to contain him. And people that lived in the neighborhood, they would say, oftentimes that they would see a shape looking out of the windows in the attic, and not always the same window, like different windows, like he was moving around up there. Now, he did remain stored in the family home in some capacity as Gene grew up, either in the attic, whatever.
Going back to the creator of the original doll, Steiff, as Bill had mentioned, and the shop in which the grandfather purchased this for his 8-year-old grandson had to have been some type of a fine quality toy shop or antique shop. Because at the time frame, and again, a lot of people don't know this, but because of my background in antiques, the Steiff company never started off making toys.
Well, my understanding was they never sold the Robert doll as a regular, production doll. It was never meant for mass production.
Some of our listeners, they might not even be able to make that connection, but you made it that Steiff in the world of antiques, that is the best quality teddy bears, most highly sought after for collectors across the world. They were the first teddy bears to actually have joints where the arms and legs could be posable, where all the rest of them were just sewn together. But their intent was never, ever to lower their standards to make a mass-produced toy of any sort.
Yeah.
They were such high-quality artisans that they made props for the silver screen and stage plays. And then these wealthy families that had the money to go afford to be able to go see these would see these just super articulated teddy bears and dolls, and they would be like, I want to get one of those for my children. And Steiff again and again says, we don't make toys. That's kind of below us. But that is what Robert the Doll was not a toy, but it was considered that it was a movie prop or stage play prop.
I believe what I read was that also it was probably meant as a display piece, but that the grandfather was how much?
And again, a wealthy person. Yeah, how much? You name your price.
How much? You name a price.
And most things are for sale if you name the right price.
Yeah, if you name the price.
Well, anyhow, after probably a decade of these rich people beating on Steiff's door, it's like, I want one of these for my kid, my grandkid. They finally decided, why not? Let's make some extra money. So then they started their teddy bear line, which by far is what they're known by. So to find a doll made by Steiff is quite rare because they were really known for their Steiff teddy bears. Also, you had alluded to the kind of sailor Navy outfit. When Gene got the Robert doll, this 3-foot boy doll, he was ecstatic. He gave it the name Robert, but what he really loved was apparently this boy loved dogs. So for this doll to have the stuffed plush doll of a dog in his lap, that was just it. I mean, that was the perfect.
That dog was
match.
Part of the original.
Apparently, when he bought it in Germany, it did have it. And the grandfather, that's the thing he thought, I have to come home with this, no matter the price.
I saw a picture that had a Robert type doll in clown clothing. So it may be the original intent was that it was like a clown or harlequin or something like that.
That could be.
But yeah, I believe the sailor outfit was supposed to be Gene's.
Yes, it was Gene's. Gene went to his mother, and this was early on, and it's like, he's going to be my friend, and we're going to adventure across the world. An 8-year-old little boy. He grew up on this quite large farm in Key West, Florida area. They said he was kind of a recluse because he didn't have any other kids around that was his age. He didn't really have anybody to relate to or play with. So this doll and him really made this connection. But he said, Mom, if he's going to go on all these adventures, he needs to be dressed like an adventurer. And so Maria, the mother, decided, I think I have just the thing. So she went upstairs into the attic and had pulled out this kind of white Navy-inspired sailor's outfit that Eugene himself had outgrown. And that's together, they put that outfit on him, and that is what he can still be seen wearing today.
Yeah.
And it kind of gave him a little bit more of a different look, obviously, than when he was first purchased. Well, shortly after the 1-year anniversary of the coming of Robert the Doll to the home, On a particular silent night, the entire household was awakened to blood-curdling screams, broken glass, and what sounded like wood being broken and drug across the floor. The father and mother, along with a servant man, ran to the boy's aid to his bedroom down the hallway. They flung open the bedroom door and found it in absolute shambles. Now, you had mentioned this had happened. This happened multiple occasions. This is one of the, I would say, weirdest, most extreme of the cases that seemed to be a turning point. Now, immediately upon entering the room, they did not see Eugene, and that scared them quite deliberately. So they found him in a corner, huddled, shaking and crying. He had become, over this period of time, kind of brought him out as a very angry young boy. Well, now it is like he totally retracted. This was a turning point. You could tell he was genuinely scared. And they, immediately Maria, the mother's like, what happened? And again, you hear this catchphrase. He pointed, Robert did it. Well, like, from what I can understand and reading of the accounts, every piece of furniture was flipped over, turned entirely, intentionally upside down. Many of the other boys' toys were broken, like, you shall have no other toys before me kind of thing.
Wow,
shattered.
You made that kind of...
Yeah, kind of creepy. And then we have Robert lying in Eugene's bed, the only piece of furniture that was left undisturbed, lying there on the pillow in his little white navy outfit, clutching his little dog, just like it was perfectly asleep. Now, the servants, obviously with hearing all of this, more and more servants came. They went into the room. It took as many as 3 grown men to flip over one particular armoire, a cabinet that had been flipped.
So it definitely wasn't Gene.
This was not young Gene at this age, 9 years old, doing this. 3 grown men to even lift up this armoire that had been flipped over. So, being a God-fearing family, especially Maria, the mother, she began to pray, and they reached out to a local minister asking what they should do. And it was, according to what you want to believe, this minister suggested he feared for the sanity of the boy and said, we need to separate these two. And that's really when it pushed, let's put it in the attic, lock him away in a trunk, which obviously Robert did not like. Now, the servants that interviewed later on said that especially at night was the time when Robert seemed to become most active. Even though he was locked up in the trunk, as Bill was alluding, he was spotted looking out windows, maybe sitting in a chair. The servants said they could hear soft padded feet like that of a doll walking on the attic floor. He was spotted trying to come down the steps, kind of like that creepy bending around the corner of the stairway, looking at the servants.
Oh, the more we talk about it, the worse this gets.
Yeah, so that was a real turning point. And at that point, Eugene himself even was open to, he didn't say like take Robert and lock him away, but he was okay with it. So it had kind of come a full 360.
Well, Gene, like boys do, would grow up, and he went on to study art in New York and Paris. And in Paris, he met Annette Parker, whom he would marry on May 3rd, 1930. The couple returned home to the family home there in Key West, and it is said that Gene's wife absolutely hated Robert.
Yes.
Could not stand him, and had Gene lock the doll in the attic once again.
Yeah, because Gene actually got it, brought it, and like displayed it in the living room, and it would like embarrass her in front of the guests, and he would start talking to it and, talking about it. And yeah.
Well, after they locked him in the attic once again, apparently this did not sit well with Robert. And allegedly, loud pacing, banging, and even evil cackling could be heard from the attic. And when neighborhood children said they saw Robert looking at them through the bedroom windows, which were not in the attic, but a floor below, Gene knew there was no way this was happening. Like, Robert's not looking at you through those windows. So he went up to check. And sure enough, found Robert sitting in a rocking chair in a bedroom looking out at the street.
Creepy.
A room he was not supposed to be in. Now, Gene once again took Robert to the attic and locked him in. And apparently, this was a pattern that happened quite often over the next few years. Now, eventually, Gene would pass in 1974. And some say that Robert was right there by his side when he passed away. His wife would pass away 2 years later, with some alleging that she died due to insanity, being driven insane after locking Robert in the attic once again after Gene's death.
Well, many of the household servants, when Eugene was a little boy, as well as the grown version of Gene and his wife, the servants said that, like, when they would enter to the various rooms, at one time it was the living room where Robert was on display. At another time, the wife comes down and finds it in his office. He'd went upstairs in the attic, apparently, and brought Robert back out again.
Well, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Robert could go around as he pleased.
Came to visit him in the office. These servants would say that he would turn his head and, like, watch them. The eyes seemed to, like, follow them as they were tidying up the rooms and cleaning. There was at least one employee that is said to have lost their life falling down the steps and breaking their neck shortly after encountering Robert, and suggesting that thing be locked back up where it came from.
Wow.
There was other alleged that they just came very sick. They would turn over, as I guess what I'm saying is the employees would come and go because nobody really liked Robert except for Eugene.
Yeah. Well, after Gene and his wife passed away, the house got sold to a Myrtle Reuter, and she owned the house for 20 years. Now, when she bought the house, little did she know that this house was going to come with an extra item she wasn't planning on. So Robert the doll still locked away in the attic. Now, when they first moved in, her 10-year-old daughter found Robert in the attic and just fell in love immediately. She's just like, oh, he's delightful, and, like, grabbed him and snatched him up and hugged him and all that.
I'm sorry. I mean, I know this is a podcast audio and you can't see it, but
look up a picture.
Phil said, it's not an adorable looking doll.
Well, much to her dismay, she would come to find out that this was not a good decision. Myrtle often awoke to her daughter's screams of terror and her claims that Robert had moved about the room in the night. She also told her mom that Robert wanted to kill her. So Robert's back up to his hijinks, and eventually they would move him back to the attic. While Myrtle lived there, visitors to the home claimed they would hear footsteps and giggling coming from the attic where the doll was stored. Some even claimed that when you took a look at the doll's expression would change if anyone were to talk about Gene in its presence. Reuter herself said that the doll would move around the house, and a plumber who once did some work at the house said that the doll moved across the room of its own accord while he was in the house. So after about 20 years of his antics, Myrtle donated Robert the doll to the museum in 1994, and he has become quite the popular tourist attraction, and his story has only grown since he was donated. Museum staff report having seen his expressions change, as well as, and this one creeped me out, seeing Robert put his hands up to the glass as if trying to get out. Robert receives about 3 pieces of fan mail per day now. Usually, apologies from people who failed to pay him his due respect when they visited.
Yeah.
And begging his forgiveness, since the story goes that if he has not paid proper respect, which includes asking his permission to take pictures, post-visit misfortune will follow. And many visitors report these misfortunes. According to the stories, the doll has been blamed for car accidents, broken bones, job loss, divorce, and a cornucopia of other misfortunes. The doll receives emails and gifts, and apparently has developed a sweet tooth for some reason. Many people send gifts of candy, which the museum staff refuse to eat since they are intended for Robert. They will not touch them.
Oh, yeah. Don't you eat my candy.
As we said, if you don't pay Robert his due respect in the museum there, bad things might happen to you. And I stumbled across what may be one of the more interesting stories in this whole thing for me. Now, I'm an old metalhead. I listen to heavy metal. I've been a heavy metal fan all my life. Even Ozzy Osbourne has blamed Robert the doll for some serious misfortune. Well, right here in my notes, when the Prince of Darkness is afraid of something, you know it's bad. So Ozzy and Jack, Ozzy's son, first encountered Robert the doll during their show Ozzy and Jack's World Detour, where Jack introduced Robert as follows. So the actual story of Robert the doll is that it is cursed by the spirit of his owner. If you disrespect him, make fun of him, take a picture without asking, or even handle him, you will be cursed and terrible things will begin to happen in your life. And then Ozzy farted in front of Robert the doll.
I was crop dusted by Ozzy.
Apparently this didn't sit well with Robert. Also during the episode, they bought a replica of Robert and shot it out of a water cannon. That seems a little disrespectful as well.
A wee bit.
Later on the Osbourne family show, The Osbournes Want to Believe, which is a show where they watch like paranormal videos or they talk about things, Ozzy claimed that Robert the doll was responsible for, quote, their year of hell. The year in question, 2019, saw Ozzy battle a host of health issues, including a fall, neck surgery resulting from the fall. The fall, of course, aggravated an injury he suffered in a four-wheeler accident years before, and he stated that after the surgery, he thought he was going to die due to the amount of pain he was in. He also suffered an infection in his hand and was hospitalized for the flu. Well, on one episode of the show, Jack brought out a doll that he claimed was Robert, and Ozzy was not having it. Ozzy jumped up and he threw the doll on the floor, and he looked at Jack and he pointed at him saying, "Not him again. You think it's an effing joke. It's bad luck. It's bad luck. I keep telling you. You think it's effing not, but just look at what I'm saying. Look at what has gone on with me. You think it's a joke. Look at me. Look at me. It ain't bad luck. No, you shouldn't have around with him. All along, when we first went to that place, the guy told us that people would buy them and send them back because things would go wrong with their life." To which Jack responded, "I had a great year after that. I got divorced." So again, when the self-proclaimed Prince of Darkness is afraid of something, it might hold a little weight.
Yeah, I don't want no part of it. No part of it.
So the next doll-related story I have is that of La Isla de las Muñecas, or, translated, the Island of the Dolls.
I'm going to go with that one.
This island is located in the channels of Xochimilco, which is south of the center of Mexico City, Mexico. I believe it's something like a big lake, like a big body of water. And this island is known for the huge collection of dolls of all different kinds found throughout the island. These dolls are in various states of decay. They've been weathered, they've been bleached, some of them have been like blistered up.
They are hanging from trees, fence posts, like
hanging from
nooses
wherever.
Around their neck, upside down.
They're missing eyes and limbs and they are rough looking. Imagine, just dolls that have been left out for almost 100
years. The island of misfit toys.
Well, local legends surround the dolls and the island's reclusive former resident, Don Julian Santana Barrera, and it makes the island a popular spot for dark tourism. Now, the story goes in the mid-1900s, and this is documented, this part of the story, Barrera left his wife and sequestered himself on the island. Now, this part kind of maybe, this is where the details become a little hazy, but it is said that not long after relocating to the island, Barrera came across the body of a young girl floating in the canal. It is said that Don Julian heard the girl screaming from beyond the grave, "I want my doll!" And the very next day, Barrera found a doll drifting down the canal. And this is near where he supposedly found the young girl's body. So Don Julian fishes the doll out of the water, and he hung the doll from a tree in her memory, and to potentially serve as a talisman, maybe to ward off evil spirits. Obviously, this is a tragic event. Tragic events attract dark energy. Now, it is sometimes claimed that he found a second doll in the canal the very next day. Whether he did, whether he didn't, no one really knows for sure. He was the only one on the island for a very long time. Now, it is speculated that after her death, the young girl's spirit haunted the island, and that over the course of the next 50 years, to help appease the girl's spirit, Don Julian began collecting more and more dolls. Every way he could find them. He would trade for them. He would scrounge through the trash.
Well, you can definitely tell a lot of these literally looked like they came from a dumpster fire.
No, whatever it took.
They were bad shape.
Didn't matter if it was a complete doll or not. Whatever it took, he just collected these dolls. And he would hang the dolls from the trees, regardless of their condition, just hang them everywhere, like you said. But he soon realized the dolls themselves became possessed of the spirits of the dead. And so now this became sort of a focal point for this energy. Now, those who knew Barrera said it was as if he was driven by some unseen force that completely changed him after this event. Whatever happened when he left his wife and family and he moved to this island, he became a whole different person. In 2001, his nephew came to the island to help him out, because obviously the guy's there by himself. He's getting older at this point. And as they fished in the canal one day, Barrera, then 80, sang passionately, claiming that the mermaids in the water were calling for him. Now, the nephew got up, took off for a minute, go to the bathroom, go get something, whatever. Don't know why he left. But when he came back, he found Barrera lifeless face down in the canal, in the same spot
as
where he found the girl. Now, some believe that since then, his spirit has joined the others on the island. After his death, his family opened up the island as a tourist attraction, and people bring dolls of their own to honor Barrera and the drowned girl. And in addition to the hundreds of dolls on this island, there are 3 huts and a small museum. The small museum has articles from local newspapers about the island and the previous owner. And in the one-room hut that Barrera slept in, the first doll he collected is displayed, as well as Agustina, his favorite doll. Visitors to the island have claimed that the dolls move their heads, arms, and open their eyes of their own accord. Some visitors have claimed to have heard the dolls whispering to one another while they're on the island.
This dude built like a honey hive instead of for bees, for
ghosts. Weird.
To inhabit weird, creepy ass dolls.
People that have been on boats near the shores of the island have said that they've heard the dolls call to them, like luring them to the island shores.
That could be the mermaids calling.
Visitors will leave offerings for the dolls in exchange for miracles and blessings. Some go to the island to change the dolls' clothes and maintain the island as sort of a form of worship. The island has the honor of being in the Guinness Book of World Records and is listed as the home of the world's largest collection of haunted dolls.
Makes sense.
Now, according to Craig Glenday, editor-in-chief, quote, "It's of course impossible to prove if the dolls themselves are haunted. We're not saying ghosts are necessarily real and that they're possessing these plastic bodies. But as claimed haunted dolls, this is the largest collection we've ever seen."
Now, do you know who owns this island? Is this owned by the family?
I think it's owned by his family.
I mean, he must have had some money at some time. I wouldn't think buying an island would have been cheap.
You wouldn't think.
Interesting.
And then to live out the rest of his life, as far as I know, without any real employment.
And apparently leaving his wife, family, whatever. Hey, I'm just going to go out here and live on this island.
Yeah.
By myself. Solitude does some strange things.
And hang up a bunch of dolls.
Well, my story that I'm going to share is the story of Rosalia Lombardo, also known as the Sleeping Beauty doll. Palermo, Sicily, the catacombs of the Capuchins. Quite an eerie, chilling place where 8,000 bodies are found in this crypt, with several hundred being real-life wrapped mummies buried deep beneath the city. Now, the haunting location gets its name from the Capuchin monks of a nearby monastery in which many now still call this their eternal resting place. But one resident seems to steal the show at only 2 years old. Now, you may be wondering, why is he talking about crypts in Sicily on an episode that's supposed to be haunted dolls? Well, that's easy, my friends. This 2-year-old little girl was essentially taxidermied in love by request of her father to become, we'll call it, the first living dead doll.
That is the most disturbing thing I think we've ever talked about. And we've talked about some weird stuff.
We've talked about some weird stuff. So she has been dubbed the most beautiful mummy in the world. And if that's not a haunted doll by all definitions, then I don't know what would be. We go to December 6th, 1920. It was a fateful day for a particular family by the name of the Lombardos of Italian descent. Their daughter, 2-year-old Rosalia Lombardo, dies of pneumonia. Her father, official Maria Lombardo, was sorely grieved upon her death. So he approached Alfredo Salvia, a noted embalmer, to preserve his little girl's body. The grief-stricken father is said to possibly had a nervous breakdown, and in his mind, Salvia, who he sought out, could possibly preserve the girl's body and her organs in an intact way that maybe years later she could be brought back from the dead. But this is just a rumor, the true legend known of Sleeping Beauty. Now, thanks to this master embalmer, Alfredo Salvia, agreeing to help this grieving family for an undisclosed price, but it is said they paid considerably, and his almost magical techniques, the body of this little girl is perfectly preserved. Rosalia Lombardo's body is kept in a small chapel at the end of the catacombs tour, and it is housed there, her coffin, inside of a glass lid enclosure. Yes, you heard me correct. She is still in Sicily, Italy, and is open to see on public tours of the Capuchin monks and the catacombs. Now, regardless, there you will find this beautiful 2-year-old little girl literally looking like she fell asleep. She still has natural color to her cheeks, and her tiny lips are almost curled up into a restful smile. An oversized bow is tied in her hair and rests atop her head. And of course, she's wearing her Sunday best, a little dress like she's getting ready to go to church. Now, in the early 2000s, X-rays were permitted to be done on her tiny body, and it showed astonishing. the amounts that her brain, heart, lungs, kidneys, and all of her other organs are also perfectly still yet preserved. Just in the past decade, some of Alfredo Salfia's papers and notes have been discovered, including a handwritten recipe that he created for this particular young patient. This being the secret formula that he sold across the world, and in particular, greatly to the United States back in the early 1900s. Now, Salfia replaced Rosalia's blood with a liquid of formaldehyde, he said in his notes, to kill bacteria, alcohol to dry the body, glycerin to keep her from over-drying, salaric acid to kill any fungi, and zinc salts to give her body rigidity. According to his own handwritten accord and notes, the formula composition is 1 part glycerin, 1 part formaldehyde, saturated with both zinc sulfate and chloride, and 1 part of an alcohol solution saturated with salicylic acid. Now, Alfredo Salfia's embalming technique, in which he studied and perfected over decades, first had him starting out with animals and taxidermy. Then he branched out finally to humans, eventually actually embalming his own father. Now, his techniques at the time and the secret formula of embalming fluid was marketed as one of the first of its kind and sold all across the world. In particular, as I'd mentioned, the United States. All of this prior to little Rosalia's father requesting him. But you can see with all of this, that is why he was sought out. There was a side of him, however, that seemed to have kind of a necromancy-style art of preserving the dead. It was misunderstood. Before this, bodies were just buried with the blood in them, or at best the blood was drained. So this whole embalming thing was it was an old art, but new to mainstream. Now, the young corpse has been dubbed Sleeping Beauty due to her innocent pose that looks like, again, she just fell asleep, and she's clutching a tiny blanket that's wrapped partially around her. Now, as far as paranormal hauntings, nothing malicious has ever occurred. However, on several occasions, even under constant time-lapsed filming, young Rosalia's eyes seemingly open and close as if she was sleeping, heard something, and then fell fast asleep before totally waking up, going back to that eternal slumber once again. Now, this has been the topic of many ghost hunts, paranormal specialists, especially for the last decades. Italian scientists are convinced that's easy enough to explain away. There's nothing paranormal going on here. They believe it's due to the nearby windows, in particular the sunlight beams that shine through and from time to time shift, and they are shining upon the child's face, giving the optical illusion that her eyes are opening slightly. They say the eyelids are just so thin of skin that a reflection from the sun on what is believed to be glass eyes would then reflect through that thin skin, giving the appearance that the eyeball is being visible through, this almost transparent skin. Still others argue it's not the entire eye that opens, but rather just a small amount. Again, as a small child is sleeping and they just kind of squint and the eye is only partially open. If the sunlight case was the instance, you would think the whole entire eyeball would be exposed. So we obviously have our believers and disbelievers, as we always will. Now, Rosalia is visited by thousands every year. Now, while she lies there asleep, by all appearances, to this day, archaeologists and scientists agree that she is one of the top 5 best preserved bodies to ever exist. On a few different notes, the catacombs did react to the Italian scientists' attempt to debunk the child's eyes opening slightly, due to what they believe was rays of sunlight from a nearby window. Now, perhaps being true believers themselves, or perhaps concerned that the sun could possibly damage the girl's corpse, they moved the coffin and the glass enclosure. They instead stood it upright and positioned it against a back wall, out of the reach of any chance that any sunlight would actually hit it. And guess what? Cameras and video clips still have caught on film her tiny little eyes opening, squinting, and closing since that move. On another reported case I found online, a group of European ghost hunters visited the site. As stated, these are catacombs deep beneath the city, And Sleeping Beauty has this glass front enclosure around her coffin. So on this particular visit, humidity seemed to be present. One of the ghost hunters was actually able to capture photographs of what appeared as a steamed water spot area on the inside of the glass, right where little Rosalia's mouth and nose was. It was looking like she literally took a deep breath and exhaled, and her breath formed these water droplets of humidity on the inside. Now, they quickly tried to debunk it, thinking surely it must be on the outside of the glass, but it was not. Yet another paranormal research I gleaned from online spoke of a similar instance. However, this time the same type of humidity or water droplets appeared to have a tiny cross drawn through it as if by a small little girl's hand, again on the inside of the glass. Museum officials were immediately alerted, and since then they have added a type of air purification and humidity control in this particular room, which did seem prone to some humidity issues, they stated, being the last room at the end of the catacombs tour. But what do you believe? This is really all that matters. We know she is real, or at least was a real person. We know her body and organs, according to science and x-rays, are almost perfectly preserved. But was it the last act of somewhat of a twisted love of a child? Or was there something more sinister or malicious in intent to possibly awaken Sleeping Beauty? Regardless, it's sure a far cry from the Disney version, where a kiss would awaken Sleeping Beauty. But then again, I don't think anyone's tried that.
It's bad enough that the father wanted this done. The guy who did it is still kind of sketchy.
Yep. He did his own father. He embalmed his own father. That's creepy.
Can't imagine.
There was also kind of some, I couldn't find any proof, but he came to the United States, Salvia, the embalmer. They wanted the formula. He was selling this embalming fluid, which obviously worked great. But then he vanishes and retracts back to Italy, almost like he's running from something. I couldn't find any details on it, but it was like something something here in the United States occurred with him, and he was almost like, I got the feeling run out of the United States or something. So yeah, maybe not the best intentions. And of course there was the rumors that he practiced necromancy. I don't know.
Well, we endeavor to be helpful here on the podcast when we can. How do you know if you've got a haunted doll on your hands? From SpiritShack.com, here are some tips to help you identify a possessed plaything.
Hold on, I'm going to take notes.
The signs include some obvious, I would think, but the doll moving on its own or changing its facial expressions.
That would seem self-explanatory.
There might be eerie sounds, including whispers, crying, or laughing, or even entire conversations coming from the doll. As with a lot of hauntings, changes in temperature, especially cold spots. Supposedly haunted dolls can evoke a strong emotional response in those that are exposed to them, including feelings of uneasiness, anxiety, or overwhelming sadness. Haunted dolls could interfere with electrical systems, causing disturbances, power outages, and electronic devices to fail. Now, if you want to cleanse the evil spirits from a haunted doll, well, you've got the old standbys of smudging, salt, blessing and prayers, holy water, sacred objects, or if it's bad enough, consult with a professional demonologist. All these things can help you rid yourself of your demonic doll dilemma.
Good to know. So, Bill, is it time for headlines?
So my headline is from the mirror.co.uk by Paul Donald, dated November 5th, 2023. I got a kick out of this. Most foul-mouthed haunted doll in the UK filmed swearing at ghost hunters.
The cursed of the cursed dolls.
A doll thought to be 100 years old has been spitting out foul-mouthed tirades after being donated to a museum for haunted objects. Scarlet is said to be the foulest-mouthed haunted doll in the UK. And a shocking video featuring the swearing haunted doll has been released by paranormal investigators who have been dealing with its outbursts in this museum for spooky objects. The alleged cursed toy lives at the Haunted Objects Museum on the outskirts of Rotherham in South Yorkshire, and the museum's curators, Lee Steer and Lindsay Sheeran, picked her up from an anonymous donor in Lowestoft, Suffolk, a year ago, as of the time of the writing. Lindsay, 43, used a digital recorder to pick up EVPs and was able to capture the obscene language as Scarlett blurted out obscene swear words. While trying to get a response from the doll, Lindsay asked, "Is that your real name?" To which a voice appears to reply, "You're effed." In a separate exchange, the doll was asked, "Who are you most scared of?" And again, Scarlett's believed to have replied, "Lindsay." However, during the time of the recording, no one had said the woman's name. Lindsay believes the doll, which was donated to her by an elderly lady, is 100 years old, and she said, quote, "The lady who owns Scarlett contacted us because her health had deteriorated, and she blamed her ailments on the doll. She wanted rid of Scarlett, so we took her in. We're always recording audio and video around the objects in the museum, and the things we get from Scarlett are typically foul. It's F this or shut the F up." She also recently blurted out the T word. British use a lot more than we do.
Okay.
And you effing idiot. It's the funniest thing, and she's become one of the most cherished items in the museum. She also loves attention. We recently announced the end of an investigation into her, and she clearly didn't want us to leave. As the next thing we know, the doors are slamming and our equipment is going haywire. It was like she was throwing a supernatural tantrum. And it's not the only spooky doll in the UK, as according to The Sun, a haunted doll was sent back to Scotland this year amid claims it terrorized a schoolboy in New Zealand. The vintage hand-painted figure called Emily is feared to have been possessed by this youngster's Scots-born late gran, who had immigrated to Auckland but hated living overseas. The disabled woman took the doll with her and often lost her temper in frustration at her plight. Upon her death, the doll was boxed up and left in her grandson's wardrobe, but they claimed it had a terrible effect on him. He began having nightmares and violent episodes during the night and once punched a hole in his bedroom wall. The family dumped the doll in their garage, but the boy fainted and kept banging his head off a chair. It was claimed that his distraught mother, who did not want to be named, said, quote, "The doll scares the family. We all agree he was acting the same as his gran."
Wow.
So that was haunted dolls.
Well, as we talked, there are so many haunted dolls out there. Seriously, I think we could do 3 or if not 4 episodes on
we could keep doing
haunted
this one.
dolls. And equally intriguing, weird creepiness. Well, for my headline, I found some proof of just our continued obsession with haunted dolls. The first one is online at IMBD Pro. It's a website kind of dedicated to sharing TV, movie-related information. Now, it said just dropped for the screen on March 17th, 2024, not all that long ago, is a new TV series, and it's called Real Hauntings, Haunted Dolls. In the banner of the promotion, it says, "We found real people willing to conjure spirits through haunted dolls. Real hauntings and real footage of the paranormal, unlike anything you've seen before." Now, I went online and tried to find where I could watch this, and at the time of the recording of this, it's March 24th. This was supposedly released March 17th. I couldn't find anything yet, so I was like, okay, well, that's a headline, but I wanted to go more. So another example of just our obsession with haunted dolls, and I thought to myself, being an eBay seller myself and what I do you realize that on eBay at any given moment, you can easily find advertised a couple hundred haunted dolls? These range from clowns, puppets, ventriloquist dolls, to teddy bears. Most seem to be from the late 1980s through the 1990s era, which I would also say seems to be the childhood of the targeted audience intended to buy them. Most of these can be purchased for about $40 to $80. And again, from the late 1980s to the 1990s era, originally crafted dolls. Now, these type dolls were mass-produced in the thousands during this time frame. They can be found at almost any garage sale, Goodwill, similar thrift store. You find these ratty-looking clothes, mangy hairstyles, or the all-natural, very common naked baby, common types for only a few bucks. So, number one, does anyone actually buy these? Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. I did a little search. In the past 90 days, over 2,100 alleged so-called haunted dolls have been sold on eBay. Average price of about $50 without the shipping. So you're going to be paying for shipping on top of that. But some as high as $1,000. However, those do seem to be more of a stone-carved true antiquity, like from Egypt or overseas, not exactly the same type doll we're talking about. And so that leads me to number 2. Why? Well, I would have to say, in all honesty, I would bet 99.99% of these haunted dolls are fake. Just a clever, yet maybe not so ethical eBay seller turning a $2 garage sale find into $50 for their pocket. I don't say this entirely to throw doubt or the concept of a haunted doll or item, but most all of these eBay listings include a tiny text you can find at the bottom of many of the descriptions, that these are considered for entertainment and amusement purposes only, and the wording does not imply that the doll is actually haunted. Now, part of this goes back to an eBay policy change several years ago, where such items were being sold without any disclaimer, and eBay bigwigs were in fear of lawsuits, believe it or not.
Yeah, I believe you have to put a disclaimer on there saying that
you do
know it's not real.
The same with like genie summoning rings and genie
Souls
lamps and all this kind of stuff. So, as a matter of fact, if this wording, something similar is not included in the listing and eBay catches that seller and the listing, it will be removed immediately. And depending on the severity, how often you've had items removed, eBay can then ban your account for a 30, 60, 90-day, or even a permanent, forever stature of you being able to sell anything on eBay. So they take it pretty serious. But still, why? That type of behavior just proves our fascination with haunted dolls and haunted things. But buyers out there, at least a few of them, surely must read the fine print, and they've got to know it's a scam, but yet they just keep purchasing them. And then number 2, if it was a legitimate haunted doll, why would you want to buy it? Why would you want to put that or bring that into your house? I went back and I started looking at some of the feedback, and I thought, are these people happy with their haunted dolls once they purchase? Does anybody say, hey, I don't like this, I want you to take it back? I found quite the contrary. So many kind comments. Oh, Annabelle was so gently and carefully wrapped, and thank you for taking care of her before I could adopt her. It was a gentleman said, I think the doll's name was Carl. Thank you for selling me Carl. He's going to fit in perfectly with my over 100 haunted doll collection that's ever growing. What can I say? I don't get it. I don't get why people would want to spend $50, $60, $100 on a $2 doll that even in their own text, however small text, might say this is for entertainment purposes only. It doesn't imply that it's really haunted. Why would you buy that? I don't get it.
Well, that's a good segue into my question, which I think you may have just answered. If the price was right, would you buy a haunted doll?
No.
Yeah, I don't imagine I would either.
No.
I don't need haunted things in my house. I don't need things that are knowingly haunted, because who knows how many objects you might have that might actually be haunted.
Right. Very true. Very true.
And especially in your line of work,
I handle that a lot.
Yeah, who knows stuff. What you're bringing in.
Yeah. But to actually go purchase a haunted doll, no. My question to you. So, Bill, do you have any first-hand accounts of any item, doll or otherwise, that you felt might be haunted? And if you don't, maybe do you know somebody that shared a story secondhand?
Haunted object, huh?
Object or doll. Yeah, I'm not going to tie you just to a doll, but...
no, not really. I've had people that, would claim that certain objects might have an ominous feeling to them or something like that. But no, I can't think of anybody. And I know that I haven't personally had an experience with an object or
like one of your megalodon teeth. You don't see like a ghost-like megalodon.
I'm pretty sure megalodons finished all their business. They didn't have unfinished business. They killed everything they wanted to kill.
They did their job.
No, I can say no. I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of.
All right. Well, for me, the answer is also no. Can't say I've ever felt anything or experienced anything quite like a haunted doll or a haunted item. And with all transparency, as I'd mentioned, my wife and I, we've owned an antique shop. We've dealt with antiques, flea markets, estate sales, storage lockers, buying and reselling stuff for over 30 years. Now, I will say we've had a lot of really creepy things come through. Everything from taxidermied baby pigs in jars to, you just, sky's the limit. Some really creepy stuff. But that being said, we did at one time own a 3-story Victorian home here in Lebanon. It was over on Madison Avenue that was built by a railroad engineer for the Southern Pacific Railroad Company. It's obviously not a doll, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some hauntings in the house. When the house was built back in the early 1900s, it exchanged hands several times. But at one point, coming into a family who I will keep pretty vague, but they had a daughter named Ruth, a young girl that lived there for quite a period of time. Would have been in the 1960s era. And when Sarah and I got the house and moved in with our 2 young children at the time now, which are both grown, there was the main stairway that had a door and a closet storage beneath it. And it got to be kind of a joke amongst us because we have a weird, twisted sense of humor. The door to the stairway would just kind of crack, unlatch, and swing open occasionally. We'd be like, oh, the ghost must be coming out or whatever to make its rounds for the night. It could be easily explained because the stairway was above it, 100-plus-year-old house, our kids doing kid things, running up and down the steps. It would be easily to explain that the door got jiggled and, so forth and so on. But one December, I had crawled underneath the stairway and we had stored, I believe it was our boxed Christmas tree and some decor underneath there. And I was pulling that out to get ready to decorate for Christmas that year, which had big 12-foot tall ceilings. We had this giant tree. But I got in there, and now I could stand up. I'm 6'2". I could stand up easily in the opening of it. But then as you go back, obviously the steps take you down to only about 2 foot tall. But a nice little storage cubby. And I pulled, I don't think it was the tree, but it was some ornaments in a box. And I hit the door. Now the door would swing in to that closet. I'd hit the door and it kind of partially closed. It didn't scare me. It didn't freak me out. Sarah was right outside. Didn't even latch. But it revealed behind that door where nobody would most likely look, there was this chalk and crayon kind of ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, typical of what, a young child would do and draw. And anyhow, that got us kind of thinking, and it added to our little story of, the ghost must be coming out to make their rounds. And we just had a feeling that we called it a little girl ghost. And it's like, the little girl underneath the stairs, she's been underneath there playing. We laughed about it. And our poor kids, they were brought up in this environment. They kind of laughed about it too, but it was an old house. You got weird noises and creaks and stuff. So our kids grew up with that. They don't think anything about it. But we were lucky enough to be involved with Historical Society, Genealogical Society, and a lot of local history. We started asking around and we found out about Ruth, the little girl who had lived there in the 60s. And actually in the apartments next door, where a house had been torn down and these apartments were built, there was an elderly lady over there that knew Ruth and often had come over and played with Ruth at our house and said, oh my goodness, she loved that under the stairway closet. That was her hideout. That was her clubhouse. And said, I myself as a little girl, I was back in there and we played together. And that she told us that was her favorite place of any place in the world. So we thought, well, that's an interesting little story. And then as luck would have it, I think it was my mother-in-law got a newspaper that had an obituary in it. And it was a local Lebanon resident who had moved on in Springfield area, I want to say, and passed away within a month. And it was Ruth. And that's when I discovered that. And I will say there was a spike of activity for a few weeks, especially after the passing of Ruth, with that stairway, the door swinging open. I remember one night I went through there and I would pull it. It would latch. You could hear it latch. By the time I would walk in the other room, it would immediately open again. I mean, it got to be a little creepy. So not a haunted doll, but definitely, maybe just at least for a period of time, maybe Ruth came back to her childhood home and wanted to play a few more times in the closet. We hope that you've enjoyed yet another installment of what we like to call Nightmares on the Lost Highway. Thanks for listening, and rest assured, there may be more episodes coming about Haunted Dolls.
Hey, real quick, call to action. I think Eric would agree. We'd like to grow this. Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Absolutely.
If you could, if you're listening on Apple, if you would go and give us a review and rate us. If you have some feedback, that's fine too. Whatever platform you're listening, follow us, rate us, give us some reviews. That helps get some recognition and gets our name out there.
We do have a Facebook page, Nightmares on the Lost Highway. You can easily find us if you want to communicate with us, if you want to share some possibilities for future podcasts with us. Reach out. We want to talk with you guys. Have a little opening, or if you have one, you may do it. Want to do? And no being. I see you bouncing up and down. Yes, I see. Good thing you're cute.
I'm going to keep that in and make it sound like you said it to me.
Oh. Come here, let me scratch your little beard.
He threw the door on the floor, and he looked at Jack.
He threw the door on the floor. To give her body rigidity. Well, we hope that you have enjoyed yet another installment of what we like to call Nightmares on the Lost Hallway. Hallway. That's a new episode.
We've been doing this how many? This
5
is like
years.
episode 160 almost.
5 years.
I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms, the final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are people that enjoy it hopefully as much as we do.
Thank you very much.